throughout my years of counseling, I've realized there are a specific person that keeps coming back, and they've tried mindfulness, they've tried whatever they could, and they try to venerate the philosophy, but somehow they just don't get it. It's like the mindfulness just either just doesn't work for them, or they have a reverse progress. Now, what I'm trying to say in this video is extremely important. It's crucial to your development in how OCD and mindfulness can be used together. But there's a bit of a caveat. I'm going to get into this in a second. But hear me out. Mindfulness can be a game changer. We've seen it everywhere in MBSR, MBCT. We've seen it almost everywhere in therapy and mindfulness. There's a storm in a teacup when it comes to the definition of mindfulness, and we see it everywhere in the world. And it's because it works, but only if you're using it in the right way, right? So, especially when it comes to OCD, the thing is, mindfulness can sometimes be misunderstood. And if you're not careful, it can make things worse and aggregate it. And I know it sounds weird, but hear me out here. When people talk about mindfulness, especially in a more spiritual, traditional sense, they often say things like, you just gotta observe whatever arises. You just gotta accept whatever permutes. Now, the problem with that when you have OCD is whatever arises can include some nasty, obsessive thoughts. And if you're just sitting there trying to be mindful of those, you can end up getting swept away by them. Now, I'm not saying it can't work. I'm not saying mindfulness in this context cannot work, but I'm saying it's the lesser of the two evils to try and do it elsewise. So it's like trying to watch a horror movie calmly. It's just not going to work as well. And again, it's not saying that it can't work, but I'm saying that this approach is a rocky road. And I think there's a better way. So here's what I've learned. Mindfulness in the context of OCD needs to be structured to grounding yourself in reality. And by reality, I mean using your senses firsthand. That means what you can see, what you can hear, what you can touch, what you can smell, and what you can taste. So we're not talking here about thoughts. We're not talking here about tantrism or Zen. Mindfulness meditation is not tantrism. It's not Zen meditation. It's not Taoism. We're not using visualizations here. We're just looking at what is. That is trusting common sense. So that means not the thoughts that are popping up in your head, not the what ifs, but what's actually happening around you right now. So, in a lot of spiritual traditions, mindfulness is about noticing that reality is kind of an illusion, that everything is interconnected, and all sorts of other gibberish. And that's alright in that context. But when you're dealing with OCD and therapeutically dealing with a specific anxiety disorder, you need something a bit more concrete. And we need to be able to ejaculate the definition of mindfulness to fit your reality. Now, your reality is your senses. That's my philosophy. I'm not saying that's all, that's omniscient to reality, but I'm saying that's your reality. So that's your best bet. And that's why people with OCD oftentimes get intertangled with imaginary phantasms. And that's why you're in OCD land, because your mind is essentially channeled through a medium of OCD, and that's why we want to grab you back to reality. So the big problem with OCD, and it's something that I've borrowed through inference-based therapy, is the whole idea of inferential confusion, that in OCD you're essentially inferentially confused, and the way to get out of that confusion is to ground yourself in reality and to learn to trust again your senses like normal people do, because that's what normal people do, right? So instead of just sitting there and trying to be mindful of every thought that pops up in your head, what I'm suggesting is that you focus on grounding yourself what's real. That so you want to look around you, you want to taper into reality and adjust yourself based on the rhythm of the world around you. That means you want to listen to the sounds you can hear, and especially when it comes to sensory, motor, or somatoformosis, or hyper awareness, or obsessing about obsessing. That's essentially crucial that you're doing this correctly. So let's say in the form of where you have somatic form OCD about breathing, that's all right. That's exactly where you can use mindfulness correctly, because instead of trying to anchor yourself to thoughts, you're just going to go back to your breath, and instead of trying to focus on the eutherto or an ad hoc definition of your breath, you're simply just going to permute exactly the feelings that you have. So you're not going to adjust any type of or attribute any type of labels to it. You're just going to see it for what it is in the moment. So it's going to cancel out that what if thinking of past and present, right? And of course, this is something mindfulness does very, very jovially. But what I'm saying again is that you need to learn to trust your senses. You need to come back to the here and the now and to common sense as much as possible. And that's the practice that you're trying to aim for. You're trying to aim for not trying to steer yourself away from thoughts, or not trying to pull yourself out of your thinking mind, but to just see things in reality, less rose tinted and more actual, right? So to get back to the whole idea of mindfulness, you might have tried mindfulness before as a way to get used to or even dismiss your obsessive thoughts, but that's not what I'm talking about here. I'm not saying you need to ignore your thoughts or that you need to push them away, but rather don't get lost in them. Stay grounded in your senses, let them be your guide back to reality when your mind starts to spiral. And as you can see, this will be your new approach. This is I believe, the X factor that a lot of people miss when they practice mindfulness for OCD, because they seem to miss this cardinal push into the right direction. And I think it's because of the different definitions of mindfulness, especially from spiritual teachers that aren't really doing it therapeutically, and that we need a bit more of a binocular version of this mindfulness practice for OCD in specific, and in anxiety in general. So I wanted to produce this video as a bit of a retort to other YouTubers. I'm potentially going to put them in the hashes, but I believe that this definition is the more sensible means of practicing mindfulness for OCD. So please get back to me, please leave your comments, and I would like to hear from you and reply. Thank you so much for this. Thank you for tuning in, and I will present and upload more videos regarding this topic and my counseling advice. Thank you so much.